corpse of Carillion lies already beginning to rot on the industrial wasteland of Britain. A giant Ponzi scheme, kept afloat by taxpayers' money, building an international company without assets. A company comprised of McAlpines, the builder, Tarmac, Laings, all kinds of industrial giants were blancmanged into something called Carillion, and it's all turned into carrion. This corpse, which lies on the wasteland of post-industrial Britain, is going to be the biggest industrial disaster in British history. I spoke to an expert yesterday. He's on my television show tomorrow, Professor Rudy Klein. His estimate is that the job losses, not immediately, but over the next months and 1 or 2 years, will reach 6 figures. 100,000 job losses. And literally tens of thousands of supply chain businesses either forced into closure or retrenchment. Savage retrenchment. I spoke to a business yesterday who are owed £1 million by Carillion, which they will never now see. Not a penny in the pound. Tens of thousands of small and medium-sized British businesses, the backbone of what is left of industrial Britain, broken by this government and the governments that preceded it. Because don't think, because you know me, that I'm going to spare the original sinners in this drama. But what do I mean by a Ponzi scheme? Well, here's what they did. They persuaded somehow, you can speculate, I cannot, at least on air, as to how. They persuaded government at a national and local level to give them contracts for everything from HS2 to serving school dinners to your children in their state primary and secondary schools, to building hospitals and running essential services in those hospitals, refuse collection, everything. And this company had no assets. It has nothing to sell. It took the government's money, your money. It subcontracted the work to other people and then didn't pay them. Extended their payment delay time up to 120 days. And for that 120 days, they kept the money and they played the market and the currency market and the share market. And of course, the executives and the directors didn't fail to divvy up a grotesque amount of it for themselves. And you know what they did when it reached day 119? They told the company that was desperately waiting on their money for the work that they had done, we can pay you tomorrow, but we'll have to pay you less than we originally contracted to pay you. You can take it, or it'll be the last job that you ever get from us. Which was fatal, of course, because Carillion was getting almost all the contracts. Do you know what else they did? They told businesses that had done the work for them, the work that you see with your eyes, was done by those subcontractors. They told them, if you want your money quicker than 120 days, you'll have to pay us to pay you. You couldn't make that up. Now, the scale of this disaster has been tragically underplayed in the mainstream media because it throws a sharp light, a searchlight, onto what's been happening in Britain for the last 20 years in the privatization mania, which has led us to the situation where a school cannot employ its own school dinner ladies. Your local council cannot employ their own dinner ladies. They've got to go to somebody called Carillion, who'll then hire the dinner ladies through a subcontractor company. Why? Because Carillion was private and the other way of doing it was public. Private good, public bad. That's what they said. And Labour gave it its biggest boost of all. Sure, John Major started it, but Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were maniacally fostering this ethos. So Labour and the Tories were seeking to privatise through public finance initiatives virtually every aspect of our public services and of our industrial life. Blair and Brown were worse than the Tories. Worse than the Tories in this mania. And so, with apologies to George Orwell, private good, public bad, the pigs said to the men and the men said to the pigs. And as you looked at the pigs and you looked at the men, you couldn't tell which was pig and which was man. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has been right on many, many things. I should know because I was right with him, literally as well as metaphorically. But Jeremy Corbyn told you so. Jeremy Corbyn told you over decades that it would all end in this kind of disaster. Do you know in Derbyshire, firefighters are having to be drafted in to serve school dinners because Carillion has gone burst. This is a measure of how completely our political class has failed us. Labour and Conservative. New Labour and old Conservative have failed us catastrophically. And just when there was a possibility that this great ideological battle could be rejoined with Corbyn with a halo around his head of having opposed all of this right from the beginning, along comes the Foreign Secretary and shouts, "Look over there! Look over there! Look over that channel! We can build a bridge over there." I suppose we're lucky because a couple of months ago, despite 3 consecutive profit warnings and share prices falling, as the market could see Carillion on its way to Davy Jones' locker. If it had been a couple of months ago, Boris Johnson and his pals would have given the gig to build the bridge across the channel to Carillion. Strong and stable bridge? I don't think so. Quite apart from the fact that the English Channel is almost the world's busiest seaways, so it'd have to be an awfully tall bridge for all the ships to get underneath it. Apart from the gargantuan cost, Boris Johnson already cost us £45 million on a garden bridge that nobody wanted and had to then be abandoned amidst a great many suspicions about the way the whole thing had been handled. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. 45 million for a garden bridge that was never built. How much are we talking about, Boris, for your bridge to France? A bridge too far, as I'll be discussing with some later. And this was all part of a most peculiar love affair with Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, who has very graciously offered to lend us the Bayeux Tapestry. Now, I'm not sure how it is an act of kindness to offer someone a tapestry that was first of all made here in Canterbury, but in any case depicts the French invasion of our island, the killing of the English king, Harold, and a subsequent occupation of 1,000 years by the French. That's more of an insult than an act of kindness, as far as I am concerned. And Boris, who flies by the seat of his formidable pants, came out with a bridge from nowhere. And it's going nowhere. I'll tell you what, if we've got the hundreds of billions to spend on a bridge to France, I'll give you 100 better things to spend it on. And lastly, 1 year in, tiny hands, big button, Donald Trump. Just before the lights went out this evening, when the US government grinds to a halt through a complete absence of government funding for all public services, he tells us, and you heard it on the news, that the right to life is America's #1 priority. It's the #1 right, he says. This, the morning after yet another prisoner was injected to death in a country which has one of the highest rates of execution in the world. The right to life, don't make me laugh. The right to life, unless you're an Iraqi, unless you're a Yemeni, unless you're a Syrian, unless you're a Palestinian, the right to life, unless you're Vietnamese, unless you're Cambodian, unless you're Chilean, Salvadorian, Nicaraguan, unless you're one of the scores of countries that the United States has invaded and massacred. Not to mention the right to life of the original Indians, the original Americans, who were subject to a genocidal act of mass murder scarcely surpassed in all human history. The right to life, Mr. Trump, don't make me laugh.